And it's changing the mindset of even guys that are, freshmen, sophomore, juniors in high school. There's so much information out there about the money that you can make at the Division I level.
Right. Question, though, that kind of stems from that is building trust within a team with this ever-changing dynamic where you have maybe different players. As you mentioned, we haven't had to deal with that maybe as much as some programs have, but we have new players coming in, trying to build that trust maybe in a shorter amount of time. You have a limited amount of time before the season gets started. How do you build that trust with the players that are already there, with new players coming in? How do you build that culture and trust within a team?
Yeah. Well, I think, first off, it starts with my relationship with the individual. And I think, obviously, this sounds so simple, but I think a lot of coaches miss this. Like, it starts when you're recruiting the kid. It starts, whether it's a transfer, we've got two guys on our team this year that came in with 1 year left to play. And then, we got quite a few guys that were freshmen that came in this year. But it starts with honesty in recruiting. It starts with describing what your program looks like, what your expectations are for everyone. And our philosophy has kind of been like, hey, this is who we are. These are the expectations. This is what things are going to look like for you if you choose to come here. These are the things that you're going to be accountable for. Here's how we're going to help develop you as well as everybody else within our program. I think a lot of coaches do that in reverse, where they recruit the individual and they tell, Joe how good of he is at this, and so they build up this selfishness to begin at the beginning of the process. It's all about them, and how good they are individually. And then they come in here, and then you flip the script on them. You say, "All right, let's come together."
In a way, you're kind of almost deceiving the player in that way, where
100%.
and one of the things that Jonathan Estes talked about on our previous podcast was honesty within players. These players are in front of you right now. If you work hard, you might be able to get, maybe into the lineup. Being honest in the forefront, and he mentioned a quote from John Wooden. If you say something to a player, they might be mad at you for 3 days, but if you do something, they'll be mad at you for a lifetime.
Sure.
Without being honest with them. And I think that's true with not only with recruiting, but also expectations on the court, like you were talking about, that teamwork mentality, being honest and letting them know what the culture is that we're working for here, whether it be at Freed-Hardeman or whatever school you're at. But I think honesty definitely is one of the things when I was kind of looking up how do you build trust with not just athletes, but also whether you're a teacher, whatever job you're in, it's being honest with people.
Sure.
What about conflict? We're thinking about conflict. Every team, this is probably displayed a little bit more when teams are not doing well. You see a little bit more conflict, maybe a little bit of trying to figure out what's going on. But conflict within a team is inevitable at any point throughout the season or off season. How do you approach resolving maybe disagreements or misunderstandings in a way that builds up the team and maybe doesn't cause it to crumble?
Yeah. Well, you really got to take time to get to know the individuals. You've got to be aware as a coach and spend time with them outside of just on the court, so you can kind of get to know the dynamic of your team and figure out who your leaders are and how to reach different people. They all cannot be reached the exact same way. Certain people need to be really pushed. Other people need a little love. Certain people need to be called out in front of the group. Other people you just need to call into your office and have a conversation or hold them after practice. And so I think it begins with just your relationship with the individual. And again, it sounds very simple, but having built up a lot of equity in that relationship and a lot of trust within that relationship, when there is conflict, and, it helps that we've had some success here, when you have some success, they tend to believe you. They tend to buy in a little bit more, and you can reference maybe some past experiences where guys have been in a similar situation and how this worked really well for them or this didn't work very well. But, it takes some, just emotional intelligence and understanding the dynamics of a group and who your leaders are and how to handle people. But, to sum a lot of that up, again, it goes back to having that real, genuine relationship with your players and spending time with them and getting to know just who they are and what makes them tick. And, there's certain things that are going to make guys tick that you can easily go to, and then there's certain things that aren't. And so just knowing your guys, and you got to spend time with them. And, and care about who they are. I
Yeah.
mean, you got to take time to really genuinely care about who they are and who they're becoming along the way to be able to quickly resolve those issues.
How do you maintain morale maybe during difficult times? This season we've done pretty well, lost a couple games, but overall I'd say probably you're happy with where we're at. There's always room for improvement with any team, but difficult times in the season. Maybe it's going to a place like Georgetown where there's a lot of, the court is very difficult to play. You talked about how important the bench is, the morale that they have, the energy they bring to the team. How do you help maintain that morale throughout a long season where you have probably one of the toughest conference schedules in the nation, Mid-South Conference, very tough? How do you maintain that morale with not only the players that are in the game, but also those on the bench?
Boy, it's hard. You and I were talking a little bit before we got on air here, and you focus on the process, and it really just comes down to you being the best that you can be every single day, which sounds so simple, but it's so hard to do. And
Mm.
you talk about, we in the preseason we talk about having a microscope and a telescope. It's a John Gordon reference
Mm.
there, where you're looking at, hey, this is where we want to get to in mid-March and late March. That's what we're shooting for. That's where we want to go as a team. Maybe it's different for an individual. That's where I want to go as an individual. Okay. And then you kind of come back in and you focus in on, all right, what does that look like today? Because a lot of today's equal tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, it can't be more simple than showing up and being your absolute best every single day. So you kind of always go back and forth, but you understand that it's a process and it's a grind. And sometimes, I mean, I tell you what, like sometimes just recognizing how hard it is, but knowing that you want to be different and that you want to be as an individual, you want to be a champion. As a team, you want to be a champion, and how unnatural it is for us as humans to do more than average.
Yeah.
But guys like that challenge.
Yeah.
Guys like that challenge. When you talk about the word different and you recognize that, hey, showing up today for a shoot around at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning when you got in late last night, this is what we love.
Yeah.
Like, this is what makes us special.
Yeah.
We're here. It's 8 o'clock. We're about to be in a full sweat at Georgetown. It's 110 degrees in the gym.
On purpose, probably.
And we love it.
Yeah.
You gotta embrace that hard stuff. You can't dodge it. You gotta recognize it, and you gotta say, hey, today it will be an easy day for us to just get by, for us to just do the bare minimum. But that's not what we're about. That's not what you're about. That's not what we want. That's not what we signed up for. That's not what we agreed to.
Mm.
And so it's just this back and forth, because honestly, I mean, the big games are easy to get up for. It's the games that you're playing good teams that maybe are unranked in the Mid-South. So those are the games that are most challenging for coaches and for players, because it's like, you got to show up. And like you mentioned, I mean, we're having a good year. And so, with us, being a top 5 team, reigning national champs, you've always got that target on your back. But morale is just understanding that there's only one way that we do things,
Yeah.
and holding them to that standard and reminding them why the standard is what it is.
Yeah. Talking about the process, has that changed any with the success we had last year as far as the process goes, with maybe having some success from previous seasons? Is the process a little bit different now, or do you try to stay within that same things we were doing last year, or is there a little bit of difference with having that success?
Well, every team's a little different. Last year we had a lot of guys that were returning, probably as far as guys that were playing, probably 80-90% of our team was back from the previous year. But to answer the specific question, I think the standard just goes up. It's not that the process looks any different. You just got to understand the standard is the standard. And every year that literally, if you go back and you track our program for the last 5-6 years, every year we've taken a step forward. We've taken a step forward. First year winning season, second year, got to a certain level. Third year, make the tournament. Next year, win a couple games, and it's just been a steady progression. And some of that's been on me, as far as me raising that standard. And sometimes as a coach, you got to be realistic about where you're at in the process. You can't go from the bottom floor to the top floor in a year, and if you do that, there's a great chance that what you accomplish that year is not going to be sustainable. And fortunately for us, we've taken the stairs, not the elevator, and it's just been one of those floor number one,
Mm-hmm.
floor number two, floor number three. And so we've built something that I think is sustainable, but it's been a process. And really, as far as just the consistency of it, I mean, the standard's the standard. This is just the way we do things, and that coming in. So
Yeah.
don't expect anything different.
Right. So I'm a communication guy, so I love talking about communication, teach communication classes here at Freed-Hardeman. But speaking about the process, the culture, the mission, the values of a team, speaking about communication, how much of that is important, an important role as a coach, as a team, to actually voice those things, communicate those things to the players? You talked about in recruiting, this is something that you talk about early on, but even when you have all the players together, how much conversations are taking place? This is what we're about. This is what we need to do. This is how we need to act when we're on the road, when we're at home. This is how we need to carry ourselves. This is how we need to be a better teammate. All those kinds of things. How much of that is, as a coaching staff, is communicated to your players and within each other on the team?
Man, it's probably the most important thing. To be honest with you, it's probably the most important thing. And again, it starts in that recruiting process. And I can't overstate that. I know I've mentioned it 2 or 3 times, but that's really where you're setting the stage. You're letting them know. And I'll be honest with you, we've missed out on a lot of really good players that their talent could have helped us go
Right.
to a higher level. But when you're honest with people and you set that stage and you communicate those standards early on, certain people just decide that's not for me.
Right.
I don't fit into what you're projecting. I don't fit into the culture that you've created there, and it's not for everybody. There's got to be some selflessness when you when you join our team. But as far as just the importance of communication, I mean, it can't be overstated how important that is. And I think it's an everyday thing. We've got certain things within our program that are communicated in the recruiting process, and then certain things that once our team starts getting together that we reiterate. We hit on those things we've already talked about. We talk together about them together as a team. We talk about how those certain standards, we've got 5 core values: hardworking, unselfish, tough, accountable, and joy. Those are our 5 words. We define what each of those are early in the season. We talk about what that looks like in our day-to-day lives as students, as teammates, as friends, as teammates, as player-coach relationship, as player-to-player relationship. Give examples of how to hold someone accountable in the right way. There's a lot of teaching and a lot of groundwork that's laid before you ever get to those points of conflict. You mentioned conflict. Like, I think a lot of things can be avoided if you've put enough thought and time and intentionality. Is that a word? Being very intentional about, hey, this is how things are going to be. Not being reactive, obviously being proactive, where you already have communicated, hey, this is how we're going to do things. This is how we're going to handle these situations. So, I mean, communication, as far as how it pertains to coaching, is extremely valuable, and life in general. I mean, as you know, being a communications major right now, I mean, a communications teacher right now with these students, it's not something that really comes natural to a lot of kids that are, 18, 22, 23 years old. So much of that now is done behind a screen and not face-to-face verbally.
Right.
And that's one thing I love about sports. Anybody that's playing college athletics, in my opinion, or high school athletics for that matter, I mean, the value that you get from being part of a team and working through conflict and being held to standards and having to, communicate through the good, through the bad. I just think those kids right now have such a head start on life, and that's not, take a shot at anybody else that's not playing. I'm just saying
it just gives them a lot of experience handling a lot of situations that other people might not have. Yeah.
Athletics is great right now.
Yeah. One of the things you talked about with teams, every team is different. Every sports team is different. Basketball is different than baseball. You have a lot of unique perspectives on every team, a lot of diverse perspectives, a lot of people from different states, different countries a lot of times. We're thinking about communication. That can be difficult to communicate. You mentioned earlier about every player has a different personality. You have to handle how you instruct them, how you correct them, whatever it is, in different ways. How does having diverse perspectives shape a team, but also How do you kind of make sure that everybody is able to their voice is heard and that everybody's on the same page, even though everybody's from different backgrounds?
Yeah, and that was one of my biggest concerns. The year I came in as an assistant coach, was just like I'd played a couple years of college ball, but really didn't have a lot of experience. That particular year, I think we had 3 or 4 international players. We had players from different parts of the country, and I was like, are these guys going to listen to me? Am I going to be able to reach them? We had a kid from the Bahamas, kid from we had all these guys from so many different places, and that was really a great year. And the thing I took away from that year, having had so many, we had people here from Chester County, we had Simon Francis on that team, we had Ehab, we had Jamil Watt. I mean, I can remember all these different guys and all these different personalities.
Is that the Dotsenko was from Russia
Dotsenko
too?
was
Yeah.
Russia. So, I mean, we've had so many different guys, and I remember, honestly, I was a little intimidated. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to figure this out,
Yeah.
But what I took away from that year, and I learned it pretty quickly, was like, people are just people. Wherever you're from, we all want the same things. We all have the same fears. We all have the same feelings. We may communicate them a little differently in, some people being a little louder or quieter or, being very verbal or not. But really, we're all the same in so many, in every way, in every way. We all have the same things. Our experience and past may be a little different, but
Yeah.
everybody's here for the same reason. And so, as far as our team in particular, that's one of the things I talk about with guys early on is like we've got people from so many different backgrounds, but I try to recruit high character people only. And high character people may be from another country. They may be from a single family home. They may come from a Christian background, a non-Christian background. But character's character, and people that are good people are good people. And it's crazy to me how when you focus on those things and do those things, how quickly a team can come together.
Yeah.
When you've got when you describe the culture that you're going to be stepping into and what's going to be expected of them and all those things that we've already mentioned a couple times in the podcast here, but like when they get here, even guys that are from different parts of the country or different parts of the world, there's 2 things that we talk about and specific to this, and that would be trust and respect.
Right.
The foundation of every relationship is built on those 2 things. Can I trust you and do I respect you? If I don't trust you or I don't respect you, we're going to have problems.
Yeah, and both of those things are earned. That comes with time. It's not something that you always have right away. And that's something, again, you have to build that within your players, within the team culture as well. That's just with any relationship requires a little bit of time to build that. Yeah. Do you have any personal story you can think of, or maybe it's just a certain team that you've coached where teamwork made a big difference in achieving a goal, or maybe overcoming some tough time that you had to go through? That might be a tough question to narrow down one specific thing, but is there anything that comes to mind for that?
I kind of think back to the team that would have been 2 years ago when we went to the Sweet 16. It was the first time, we hosted the national tournament that year and won some games. Went to Kansas City that year, lost in the Sweet 16 to Grace that year. But that was a really big year for me as a coach. For so long, I had heard and had a little bit of experience with a lot of the things that we're talking about today, as far as building a culture and recruiting high character guys and all those things. But that was the year that I really didn't think we were just super talented. We were really young. That's not a shot to the guys that were on that team. We just weren't the most talented, but we were a really together group. And Grant was young at the time. Clark Gandy, who you mentioned earlier, he was young. And so when we got back, or I can't remember if we were back in the office, but I remember the conversation, and I asked both of them. I was like, what do we take away from this season? Like, what is it that we can really just learn from the success that we had this year? Because we won the Mid-South Conference that year. We came back from 19 down, beat Georgetown in the conference championship. There were so many of these things that we just found a way. And Grant, who traditionally is a very talent-driven guy, he wants talented players.
Right.
Like, that was the young Grant, where he was like, he wanted the most talented guys. And
Yeah.
I remember him talking about how you don't have to have the most talent, but boy, if you're together and you have a great culture, you can really accomplish a lot.
Mm.
And I think, it always eats away at coaches. You just think, man, if you can just get that one guy that's just a little bit better, but do you keep the togetherness? Do you keep that connectivity? Are you staying true to your culture? And so really for me, just when it came down to teamwork, that team was filled with guys that had been here for a long time. Some of those guys weren't playing, but Logan Bonds, Dawson Bailey, Zach Bauer, Quan and JJ were young that year. Hunter Skurlock.
Skurlock, who was at Freed-Hardeman for 12 years.
Forever. Forever.
Yeah. I loved watching him play, though.
Riley was here. I mean, just so many guys that were on that team. I think Brandon Thomas was our only transfer on that team, if I remember correctly.
And he was here for 1 year, I believe.
He was a grad for 1 year. And so we just had a group that was just – they loved each other. I mean, trips were so much fun. Bus rides were so much fun. They just had such a good time together. And it was just that moment of like clarity for me where it was like, this is real. It's not just something that you're talking about. It's not just coach talk and, somebody trying to sound smart. Like what we've got is special. And this has been, validation that, hey, we can do it this way and have a lot of success.
Yeah. Well, Coach, it's really, really been a pleasure having you on. I know this is in the middle of the season. I didn't know if I was going to get you to come in here I know you got a game tomorrow even. So I really appreciate you coming on. Really appreciate your team. I've had a lot of them in class and very respectful players, and I know that's probably true for a lot of the other classes they're in as well. And really appreciate you coming on. Teamwork and collaboration. When I think about teamwork, I think about some of the teams that I've seen you coach and just how together they are as far as, you have 2 units that come in 5 at a time and just knowing both of them picking up where the other one left off. And that's not something that comes naturally to players. A lot of times we talked about how players want to showcase how much they can do. And it's not always about how can we make the other players look better. And that's something I see with your teams. And that's why I wanted you to come on and talk about some of the behind the scenes things of how you make that happen. And you touched on a lot of really, really good things. So I really appreciate you coming on today.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Matt. And I think this is great what you're doing. It's really needed today in college athletics specifically. And so I'm looking forward to following the podcast and sharing this because this is great.
Thanks for joining us this week. Special thanks to Drew Stutts for being my guest this week. Be sure to check out this episode and future episodes on Spotify or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also find the Playing with a Purpose podcast on the Ministry League Podcast Network and on the Freed-Hardeman University Athletics Champions of Character website at gofhulions.com/champions of character. Join us next week as we talk to Freed-Hardeman Dean of Student Life, Tony Allen, on community responsibility. And remember, winning isn't just about the scoreboard. It's about the character we build along the way. We'll see you next week on the Playing with a Purpose podcast.